Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink's CYDVF, and on Frankfurt's C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is award-winning investigative reporter and publisher of the Breaker News, Bob Mackin. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
What's your take on this developing story between Saudi Arabia and Canada?
Well, it's a very interesting one in the fact that Canada is taking on a very large and significant country from the Middle East region, a country that Canada doesn't do too much trade with. I mean, there is some oil bought for East Coast cities, but this is not a country which is significant to Canada as another human rights offender, which is China. And I don't think we're going to see Canada pick a fight anytime soon with China, although it hasn't been exactly a walk in the park between the Trudeau government and the Chinese government. The Chinese government wants a free trade agreement on its terms, and to the credit of Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland, the foreign minister, they have not acceded to those demands. But there still is a big question, a little bit too much influence by the People's Republic of China in Canada, and a lot of people on various sides of the political spectrum believe that the federal Liberal government isn't doing enough there. But here it is taking on Saudi Arabia after basically putting out a tweet about how the Saudi Arabia government isn't really respecting women's rights, and it's also detaining a blogger who's got a family in Quebec, and they've treated him awfully. And there's been Amnesty International campaigns for several years to free Raif Badawi, but to no avail. So, with the recall of students on scholarships studying at Canadian universities, recall of Saudis in Canadian hospitals, we'll see where it goes. But I find this interesting from another level because Trudeau, as we get closer to the 2019 federal election, his strategy, as we've seen this summer, is to essentially run himself against Donald Trump. There's enough research out there that Canadians are not terribly excited about Donald Trump, and especially with the trade war and the tariffs that have been slapped on a lot of Canadian goods. There is growing frustration with our neighbor to the south. This all boiled over at the G7 summit in Quebec, and the war of words essentially that spawned. So Trudeau is looking beyond Andrew Scheer, the Conservative leader. He's looking beyond Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, and is trying to position himself as a leader to lead the Liberals into a second term next year, as someone who's more of a statesman, who is standing up for Canadian interests and standing up on two fronts against Saudi Arabia, which is a country where, of course, Donald Trump had a famous visit there and seemed to get along with the Saudis. And the Americans are taking a sidelines view of this. They're not getting involved one way or another in this dispute between Canada and Saudi Arabia. So as much as there may be good reason for Canada to be a little bit critical of the Saudi Arabia human rights situation, human rights record, as Donald Trump actually was when he was running for office, but that seemed to have changed since he took office. There are other reasons. There are other games being played behind the scenes, and every day that goes by is one day closer to the October 2019 federal election, and Trudeau and his cronies are all looking to score points.
Andrew Scheer's strategy, it seems to be, against Trudeau is just to keep his mouth shut and let Trudeau do all the talking and perhaps make all the mistakes.
Yeah, that is a strategy, although Andrew Scheer's got to get himself better known across the country, has to score some bigger political points. Of course, the Trudeau government has made enough mistakes out there that if Scheer does manage to put together a campaign that can pinpoint all those mistakes, put them all together very simply, very easily, you'll have a good case to become the next Prime Minister of Canada. The Conservatives have raised more money in recent months than the Liberals for their war chest for 2019. But then again, there is this culture war that's happening in the United States, and you can expect that the Liberals will try to play that card. They'll try to look at what is resonating with American voters and with Canadians who are exposed to American media, and they'll craft their message toward that. It'll be up to Andrew Scheer, of course, to present a moderate agenda, a Canadian Conservative agenda, not an agenda that is too closely tied or connected to the American Conservative movement. And Jagmeet Singh, on the other side of the spectrum, announced this week that he's going to be running in Burnaby South to take over the seat that Kennedy Stewart is vacating in order to make his run for the mayor of Vancouver. There's a lot of questions about Jagmeet Singh, that fundraising for the NDP has really fallen flat in recent months, and their support seems to have been slipping. And a strong NDP would help split the left-center vote and would definitely help the Conservatives. But if the NDP is softening, and if Jagmeet Singh isn't able to win this by-election, then it could be difficult for him to put together a team to make the run for 2019. But as we saw what happened in Ontario with the political upheaval that went on earlier this year, even though it ended up with someone on the right side of the spectrum becoming the premier, it's not such a problem for a party to make leadership changes even in chaos and controversy just a few months before an election. Sometimes it can work. So we still have a lot of time to go between now and October 2019, but the federal Liberals have essentially started their campaign now, and we'll see how successful this can be if they can try to change the channel and cause people to think of Canada's disputes with the U.S. instead of look at all of Trudeau's foibles. That could be profitable for them in the long run. Of course, one big experiment's coming this fall, the legalization of marijuana, which has been a big strategy of the Liberal government under Justin Trudeau. If that does not go the way that Trudeau wants it to go, if there's any controversies that happen afterwards, that'll be on his shoulders. That'll be on his shoulders, and you can bet that Andrew Scheer on the right side of things and Jagmeet Singh on the left side of things will make sure that voters know about it.
Could one of Trudeau's strategies be bring in a national prescription plan?
That has been talked about, but the question is, how fast can they do it, especially since the deficits and the debt have gone up, and especially since the Kinder Morgan pipeline purchase, which has got people across the political spectrum angry, because the people on the left that oppose the pipeline altogether are not happy, and people on the right side of the political spectrum are not happy that the government is nationalizing a proposal such as that and not being successful in finding a buyer for that. So is there money, especially since Trudeau has made a lot of promises to a lot of cities to spend billions of dollars on infrastructure? Where would they get the money for a national pharmacist system to subsidize medication, especially when it would be popular. It definitely would be popular because a lot of Canadians of various income levels are not happy with the price of medication. There are people that have rare diseases that are facing six-figure bills for specialized medication to get them through their lives, medication that isn't covered by some provincial health plans and isn't covered by some private health plans. So it would be popular, but again, the devil's in the details, and the big detail is how much would it cost?
Well, the Liberals so far haven't been worried about costs, so why would they worry about that cost?
Well, that's true, but then again, when we're in a situation where debt in provinces has escalated, it will be a talking point, especially when you've got the new wild card, Doug Ford in Ontario, who came to power, and shortly after coming to power, hired Gordon Campbell, the former BC Premier, to do a study, a quick study that is, on the spending that happened under the previous Liberal governments, which led to Ontario having one of the biggest jurisdictional debts across North America. So the debt issue is going to come beyond the fore. Look what happened in Europe, and especially Greece, and the political turmoil that happened there a couple of years ago. Well, that could happen here in North America, especially Canada, at a time when the challenges are only increasing. The aging population definitely could benefit, just like a lot of younger people, from subsidized medications, but at the same time, the cost. What is the economic case for it? How much would it cost? And how much would it cost each and every person? Because as much as we enjoy the socialized medicine in Canada, and there are benefits to that, and you hear the horror stories of people not being able to afford basic medical treatment in the United States, we've got to look at what that does cost us. There's a reason why a lot of things in Canada are more expensive than they are in the United States, and that's one reason why is because of the cost of socialized healthcare. And the cost of socialized medicine, as much as a lot of people would find relief in that, what would it cost?
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of Powerband Solutions. Powerband is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. Powerband Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX and on the OTCQB symbol PWWPF and on Frankfurt symbol 1ZV. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, great question on the Breakers website. Are we happy with Vancouver's progress over the past decade? Well, are we?
Well, that's going to be the big question asked during the civic election as it comes. It's coming very quick. We're getting close to the month countdown to the close of nominations. People have until September 14th to throw their hat in the ring and sign their papers. The nomination period will be September 4th to 14th, and the election will be October 20th. And that's a question that was asked when I did an interview for my podcast with Colleen Hardwick, who's making a second run for City Council. She's part of the NPA slate that is hoping to retake City Hall. The NPA has not been in power since losing power in 2008. And Colleen Hardwick is an interesting candidate because she's the daughter of Walter Hardwick, a UBC geography professor who was himself on city council back at the end of the 1960s, start of the 1970s with a team. And she has a lot of ideas. She's a tech entrepreneur. She's got a company that does a website called playspeak.com, which is into citizen engagement. They do it in such a way that balances transparency with privacy for those who want to be involved in helping shape their communities. And she's also a former Hollywood North film producer. And she's, like a lot of people, just trying to stay afloat in Vancouver, living down in Kitts Point, and has children who also want to stay around in Vancouver, but they've seen what's happened in the last decade or so of how expensive the city's become, how the city's become a playground for the rich, a playground for developers, and how communities have really lost control, neighborhoods have lost control of their city as Vision Vancouver consolidated its power and won 3 elections. And, part of what she talked to me about, which you can expect the NPA to talk about, is returning to basics, back to basics. That City of Vancouver, Vancouver City Hall's job is to look after the 115 square kilometers between Boundary Bay and Point Grey and the Fraser River and Burrard Inlet. And its job is to make sure the city runs properly, and also to make sure that the City Hall is funded by taxation on land and taxation on businesses in that boundary. And we've seen the last 10 years Vision Vancouver become more globally focused, with social engineering of all sorts. Some of it may have been well-intentioned. Of course, we'd all like to have a better planet, but they really went off on a tangent. Gregor Robertson became a globe-trotting mayor and spent a lot of time on the road. By the time he is out of office after the October 20th civic election, he will have spent pretty close to a year out of the town, out of Vancouver. And not a lot of that was about going to Ottawa and Victoria and knocking on doors there to try to make those governments pay more attention to Vancouver, even though he did some of that, but not all of that was about that. He spent more of his time going to international events, going to Paris and Singapore, Johannesburg, London, China several times. He popped up in China last September, didn't tell the public before he left. It was just by chance that when a reporter from the South China Morning Post received a photo of him in the Shanghai train station, just after he did an interview with the Globe and Mail about the bid for the Amazon second headquarters, where he mentioned that, I'm in China. They issued a news release the day before he came home, essentially, that said he was in China. So here's a guy who has been out about around the world, more as Gregor Robertson in big letters and Mayor of Vancouver in the small letters. We need a mayor, of course, that's going to go and meet the world and wave the flag of Vancouver, but a mayor of Vancouver who's going to go and engage with the world should be as Mayor of Vancouver in capital letters and their name in small letters. It wasn't the case with Gregor Robertson and Vision Vancouver, who have really been a controversial party because of their connections with various American-funded environmental groups and political groups, and because of their lack of ability to make political deals with other levels of government. Here we had Gregor Robertson come to power in 2008, promising in no uncertain terms that street homelessness would be over in Vancouver by 2015. Well, 2015 came and went, so did 2016, 2017, and here we are in 2018, and it's worse than ever. In fact, under Vision Vancouver, we now have a homeless crisis, a housing crisis, an affordability crisis, empty houses all over the place. We don't know whether the money that has come in, especially the billions from China, has been clean money at all, and we don't appear to have law and order at City Hall, even though the mayor himself is the chair of the police board, and he's also someone who is very interested in legalizing various types of hard drugs to try to stop the opiate crisis that has caused the overdose deaths of hundreds and hundreds of people. But he doesn't seem to be very concerned about actually stopping the drugs from hitting the streets by the nefarious ways that it does, and cutting off the supply and cutting off the criminals who are essentially putting poison in people's hands. That there used to be the 4-pillar strategy that was driven by Philip Owen and later Larry Campbell, and that included, the medical solution, that included education, but it also included law enforcement as part of the equation. And under Vision Vancouver, law enforcement in Vancouver has been has not lived up to the needs and the wants of citizens. There's been various unsolved murders. There was an innocent 15-year-old who was sitting in the back seat of his parents' car as they were driving along Broadway near Cambie, not far from City Hall, last January. And, he was innocent and killed, and that investigation is still ongoing. We don't know who did that. So here you are, 10 years after Vision Vancouver took power, and I think we're going to see a big reaction against that this fall. Ian Campbell is running as the Vision Vancouver mayoral candidate, who is a chief with the Squamish Nation, but he's from North Vancouver. And there's all kinds of other splintering on the left, there's splintering on the right. We'll see where it all ends, but we could have a new mayor in Vancouver who wins with just 20,000 votes or so, and could have a very fractured council. There could be a lot of political instability at Vancouver City Hall, and there may not be solutions to these problems for a while. There could be a lot of infighting there as the dust settles, but that's what happens when you have one party that's been in power for so long, governing a city hall as it did, in a very arrogant fashion, in a very secretive fashion as well, going against the ideals that they brought in when they came into power in 2008. They were going to be a kinder, gentler party that was going to listen to the people and listen to communities and return neighborhoods to the power structure, and average people were going to be listened to. It was going to be for the good of all. But Vision Vancouver pretty soon became drunk on their power, and were able to harness a lot of fundraising money and stay in power. And well, we'll see what happens in the next several weeks as this election takes shape.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead-zinc-silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineer gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, you took a look at Beijing 10 years after their Olympics. How did that turn out for them?
Well, I was lucky enough to be in Beijing for those Olympics, to cover it for Sun Media, 24 Hours Vancouver, and a few other publications. It was the second Olympics that I had attended. I went to the Winter Olympics in Turin. This is my first Olympics, Beijing 2008. And of course, the next Olympics after Beijing was Vancouver 2010. It was part of my goal to learn how the Olympics were organized so I could better inform readers here in Vancouver what to expect. And Beijing was, there were surprises, but there were also not many surprises in some areas. Of course, the smog was one of the big issues. And the opening day was August 8th, 2008. I was staying at the Huayan Media Village across the street and gazed out the window, and it was a very gray day. You couldn't see very far. But the Bird's Nest Stadium beckoned. The world was going to be watching. And this was an event that transcended sports. It was where sport collided with industry, with culture, with geopolitics, all inside a police state. And this was China's coming out party to the world. Hu Jintao was the president at the time. But we saw early on that things may not turn out the way we hoped. I mean, it was the idea of Western governments was to do more trade with China and hope that China would eventually open up, just like Russia did, well, for a period of time. Russia isn't, under Putin, exactly the most open and democratic society that we had hoped for, but, the Cold War did end, the Berlin Wall came down, and, there was a sense of freedom back in the 1990s, and that never really happened in China, but people thought, in various corners of the world, that the 2008 Summer Olympics would lead to China opening up. Well, when reporters got to Beijing and went to the main press center, they had been assured before they went to China that they'd be able to access the internet easily. There would be no blocks on any websites because, of course, China is notorious for the Great Firewall of China, the biggest internet censorship on the planet. And reporters got there. I was one of them, and there was no free access to the internet. You couldn't go to every website you'd hoped for. A lot of people were doing the test of the T's, the Tiananmen Square Google search, or the Tibet or Taiwan Google search, and websites about those, especially websites for various human rights non-governmental organizations or citizens groups, were blocked. The IOC did complain to the Beijing Organizing Committee, and the Chinese government reminded them of their obligations, and they capitulated. But if you still wanted to search on search engines for websites of that nature, there were little warnings or disclaimers saying, the site that you want to go to might be, have a virus. Beware. Just to scare people away, or scare those away. So we were allowed mostly throughout Beijing to wander around the city and meet people, interview people, go to sites. But of course, it is a surveillance society now more than ever, but it was back then as well. So we were being watched wherever we went, and I'm sure our communications were as well. The world media went home. Beijing's Olympic venues have not been used very much since then. They'll be used again 2022. The Winter Olympics are going there. But what's happened since then, China has basically started its own internet. All the major sites that we enjoy here, the e-commerce sites, entertainment sites, video sites, they have their versions of it, homegrown versions of it, and they also have the censorship that people struggle with, and they've even increased the amount of policing, the amount of surveillance in public. And what happened earlier this year, just in time for the closing ceremony of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, when Pyeongchang was gonna trade the Olympic flag to Beijing, well, Xi Jinping, the president of China, announced that he was going to become the president for life, essentially, that the term limits law in China was going to be scrapped, and he'd be president for as long as he wants to be. So more geopolitics and sports collide again earlier this year. So he'll be the president, all things being equal, through 2022. And we'll look back at the Beijing Olympics, and we'll wonder if things will get worse for Chinese after the 2022 Winter Olympics, because as much as China has become an economic juggernaut around the world, and how much China has sent its people and billions of dollars out into the world to make business deals and buy real estate up and down the West Coast especially, there still is the question about, will China ever become a democratic society, a society that does respect dissent and does allow people to disagree with their leaders, does allow people to publish freely, because they have economic clout, and we see Chinese also being one of the major tourist markets around the world. We just don't see Chinese being allowed by their own government to express themselves like we can, and we have the right to here in North America.
I was at the news conference when Gordon Campbell, the Premier, announced that the Port Mann Bridge would be built on time and on budget. Was he right?
No, and like every major infrastructure project here in British Columbia, the on time, on budget cliche is one that we look back at. We kind of laugh, but we also cringe because we know what that means. They overspend on infrastructure that isn't available on time, and that has economic spin-off or economic impacts on the rest of us, and inconveniences on the short term and long term. It adds to the public debt that you got to wonder if there were better cost controls and major infrastructure in British Columbia, we could probably have more infrastructure. And we could possibly have lower taxes too. Wouldn't that be great? But the problem is, and this has been discussed by international experts, Bernd Flyberg, an Oxford University professor, has looked at this phenomenon, and part of the phenomenon is that politicians love to have their names attached to major infrastructure that can help them become more popular and get votes. And of course, engineers want to engineer, and architects want to architect, and construction companies want to make money, and unions want to get their workers working. So those interests that are within the infrastructure equation all want bigger, better, more expensive, and faster. Meanwhile, we just want better services, better ways to get to and from where we need to go. And one of those places, one of those projects was the Port Mann Bridge, the new Port Mann Bridge. They decided not to twin the bridge. They decided to go with a bigger bridge, which was, for a period of time, the widest in North America. And that ended up having major cost overruns. The total cost, according to a review that was ordered in-house by the BC NDP, the total increase in the final cost was nearly $1 billion, but the report by Peter Mills of Perrin, Thoreau & Associates, public policy consultancy, really downplayed the cost overruns. They said that, well, the interest rates, interest costs were actually $270 million less than they thought they would be, and they sold some property, property acquisition costs. They got a deal on some of the properties, so there's a $50 million positive there. So the third of $1 billion in this report really is downplayed because it was offset by some other things. But this report happened because of the good reporting last summer by CBC, which had several whistleblowers telling it, along with documents, that it was leaked, as well as documents that it was able to wrestle away from the BC Liberal government by FOI, that said that the cost overruns could have been as high as $572 million, and that there was even about $100 million that was spent by the government to accelerate the project, to pay the construction companies extra to do it faster in order to open it faster, to get those photo ops, and to get people, especially in Surrey ridings, happy about the new bridge when it opened in 2012, in time 6 months later for the 2013 provincial election. So Claire Trevina, who was new as the NDP transport minister early last September, said absolutely she was going to get a review done. And unfortunately, the review was kept quiet for a long time, and it was really kept in-house. It didn't go to the Auditor General, didn't go to the RCMP, didn't go to a public inquiry. We didn't really get to the bottom of it. So I FOI'd after many months of just asking, where is this review? I finally got a copy last week, and it's a couple hundred pages, but it doesn't answer all the best questions about why this overage was the way it was, and the company that did this review, Perrin Thoreau, they've been called upon a lot since 1999 to do a lot of government work, more than $5.4 million of contracts. So they're really on the government gravy train, and you got to wonder, well, were they doing a proper investigation? And I understand that they didn't, because they didn't talk to the whistleblowers that went to CBC that would know everything there is to know about the dark underbelly of the costs and scheduling of this project. It did say that the government could have done a lot of things better. Although one thing that this report did say was the relationship that the government had with KPMG, that KPMG had a contract with about $1 million, and then they got a whole bunch of other contracts with about $21 million, and most of these contracts were handled in a no-bid fashion. And there was one fella, Gary Webster, who came to work at KPMG at a time when KPMG was the auditor of the project, as well as the owner's representative, representing the BC government. And Gary Webster's role in this is questioned, but not to the point that critics have questioned it and pointed to this as a possible conflict of interest. The consultant who did this report, Peter Mills, basically said, well, it was good to have Gary Webster on the job. He seemed to know a lot, and it was better with him. So I don't think we really got to the bottom of this report, which is very interesting because it was released by FOI. There was no news conference. Released by FOI on a couple days before the BC Day long weekend, when a lot of people were not expecting to see this, and when a lot of people aren't really paying attention to provincial politics or major road infrastructure and bridge projects. You contrast that with what happened at the end of June with the release of Peter German's report that was ordered by David Eby to look at casino money laundering, and it's like night and day. It's like the BC NDP government wanted to send a strong message that it wants to get under control crime in British Columbia. It wants to deal with casinos and the ripple effects in the real estate market, ripple effects in the illegal drug trade. Strong public position on that project, not that report. But when it came to the overruns that happened under the BC Liberals, the NDP didn't really seem to want to get to the bottom of it, and when it got a report, it just kind of put it out there, and it didn't get much play. It seems to show a bit of an inconsistency within the John Horgan administration that a lot of people voted NDP and a lot of people voted Green because they didn't want the Liberals around anymore, because they saw that under the Liberals, the old cliche of on time, on budget on one hand was completely a false narrative. On the other hand, questions about the integrity of these projects, about waste and possible corruption. And even people in the NDP voted at the party's policy convention last fall that they wanted a corruption inquiry, something like they had in Quebec, the Charbonneau Commission inquiry, get a judicial inquiry to look at what's happened in BC in the last decade and a half, especially to municipalities, to the provincial government, to major infrastructure projects, to our economy. What has gone on? But if the NDP is going to kind of do the bare minimum on this report, just a little bit above sweeping it under the carpet, they didn't go that far down. But if they're going to do that while at the same time they're getting ready to build the Patella Bridge, they've got the Broadway subway, they've got the Surrey LRT first phase, and they're also still working on Site C, which is a whole other conversation. You can do a whole show about that. There's a lot of money being spent on public infrastructure projects right now, and the big question is it being spent wisely, and are there the proper controls? And is British Columbia going down the same road that Quebec went down before Quebec and their politicians said, oh, wait a minute, let's find out if the mafia is involved, if organized crime is involved. And they did find out that it was. Well, here in British Columbia, I think we're getting close to the tipping point, because we do need infrastructure, of course, in a growing province to get around for energy, for power, of course, but not at all costs. And the more you spend, more you waste, or more money that's gone because of corruption for infrastructure.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been award-winning investigative reporter and publisher of TheBreaker.News, Bob Mackin. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.